Hi, I'm Vanessa and I love bad Star Trek. I will be the pissing Calvin temporary face tattoo that is Star Trek Voyager. Today, I will be talking to you about an episode called The Cloud, the hottest cloud in the Delta Quadrant that answers the question, huh? It's got everything. Spirit animals, breaking and entering, billiards, French women with no standards, and all the drugs are digital here at the Cloud. This episode honestly feels like a fever dream. There are moments that had my jaw on the floor. I couldn't believe what I was watching, and not in a pleasantly astonished way where I'm awestruck or moved. Instead, I was shocked into silence. The seemingly unironic absurdity blew me away. The racism and cultural insensitivity were cranked up to 11, and the plot points are so twacked out that I can't help but think I'm watching C-Lab 2021. Anytime I see an episode quite this baffling, I head over to Memory Alpha to see if anyone on the cast or the writers were somehow unhappy with the product. And no one saw a problem, and everybody thought it was great. Honestly, minus the racism, if they maintain this high-key Coconuts tone, removing the gravitas from Trek and replacing it with surrealist Adult Swim type humor, I would totally watch it, but that's not what they're shooting for here at all. And so we have this tonal hairpin turn, particularly after the last episode, which I skipped because I actually think it's great, called Phage. The writers finally got the Voyager formula right. It no longer felt like an indistinct Trek spin-off, where the seriousness of their situation, which is being stuck in the uncharted Delta Quadrant with a dwindling fuel supply, was balanced with some very well-placed humorous beats. The stakes were very clear and established early on, and these stakes were used to flesh out the characters and even showed some vulnerabilities, such as Neelix having a panic attack due to experiencing claustrophobia. Kes then demonstrates the depth of her love for Neelix by engaging in a selfless act of sacrifice, which I will not spoil because I think it's worth watching. It was touching, it was effective, and I loved it. Whereas with The Cloud, it's not just a train wreck, it is a multi-car pileup. And the first thing that spins out of control is Chakotay, because Jamaica Highwater, the Cherokee consultant they hired, was about as Cherokee as a Jeep. So every episode that heavily features Chakotay's spirituality should come with a trigger warning, because this indigenous spirituality is pulverized and pushed through the meat grinder of a white supremacist narrative. And that pops up right at the beginning when Janeway laments to Chakotay about not having a counselor on board. Since their initial mission, the one intended to put Chakotay behind bars, wasn't in need of a counselor. And Commander Chakotay lets her in on what he does to cope.
We talk to animals. It's a Native American tradition. Animals? Our own counselors. We're taught that an animal guide accompanies us through life.
Is there a different animal guide for everyone?
Actually, yes.
Let me guess. Yours is a bear.
Why do you say that?
You strike me as the bear type.
It's like a lesbian second date. The U-Haul is pulling away, and there is so much to unpack here. First, notice how he just says Native American. It's not well into the series that Chakotay is given any specific heritage, and by the time they do, it's a completely made-up group called the Rubber Tree People, whose ancient proverbs must be something like, an ant can't move a rubber tree plant. And of course, here we go with the spirit animal thing, which is essentially a new age creation. And To give it an air of mystique, spirit animals were connected by the New Age practitioners to Native American practices, just completely ubiquitously and without respect for any particular group's indigenous spirituality at all. Spirit animals are one of the myriad ways that indigenous spirituality has been completely stripped of its significance for white consumption. Because nothing about any of the groups that include animals being spiritually connected to people include white people or non-indigenous in their rituals. Indigenous rituals are not for white people. We colonize their land, for fuck's sake. We don't get to outlaw their beliefs only to steal them later. Not everything needs to include us at all. And in an article which describes the experience of Chelsea Luger from the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa and Standing Rock Sioux tribe in North Dakota, who was cornered by a classmate who demanded to know her spirit animal because, in his words, all natives have spirit animals. Even if she had no idea what the hell he was talking about, there is tangible harm created by this narrative that all 570 something groups have this feature. To assume Native Americans are completely indistinct from one another creates a distressingly thick wall of misinformation that needs to be climbed over in every conversation, as does the idea that Chakotay can just include Janeway or any other person on Voyager that's upset that they're stuck in the Delta Quadrant in this supposedly sacred practice of finding your spirit animal with a vision quest. And the way this is carried out is a lot to take in. This super important vision quest is just penciled into Janeway's schedule like a power lunch, because that's basically what it is. But instead of Palm Pilots and highballs, Chakotay brings in his medicine bundle, which is a thing for some groups, but not something a white person would ever have access to.
Will it help me find my animal guide?
Eventually, you'll have to assemble your own medicine bundle. But this will allow me to assist you in your quest for a guide.
Now?
And it includes a blackbird wing and two things created by the show. The first being a stone with a chamuzi, a rubber tree people symbol, and an akuna, which is the 24th century device that facilitates vision quests so they don't have to take psychedelics. Sort of like the virtual reality sex helmets from Demolition Man, taking out the fun part, or anything remotely sacred or important from a ritual that's not meant for white people. And in the production notes, the vision that Janeway has where she sees a lizard on a beach is inspired by the fraudulent Jamaica Highwater himself, who said, quote, "It was an experience that I had personally in a pain control clinic when I was having dreadful problems with my back. The teacher basically led us on a visual exercise and I found myself on a beach. I looked and saw a small lizard. So that moment in the episode is a testimony to my own back problems. My inner advisor is a lizard." So this fake indigenous person is like, I got high on Dilaudid, closed my eyes, and saw a lizard. And that's fine to draw from inspiration-wise because he's Cherokee. Apparently, the lizard that they used on the show was a real lizard, and it was very hard to get him to turn his head on cue. So that took hours and hours of time. Time well spent, you guys. Good job. The other thing that's wildly off balance is, once again, the bromance between Voyager's pilot Tom Paris and Ensign Kim, who ensigns real hard in the corner. Remember in Time and Again when Tom Paris was insistent on Ensign Kim joining him on a double date, and how pushy and therefore cringy it became? This scene shocked and scared me.
Dark enough for you?
What?
Get up, Harry. There's something you gotta see.
See?
How'd you get in here? You'd be surprised the things you learn in prison.
Like, wow, wow, wowie, wow, whoa. Whoa. What the fuck is Tom talking about? What things? Sneaking up on sleeping inmates is a pastime in prison? Breaking and entering into Kim's quarters and rousing him from sleep is not a violation or anything. Kim seems totally cool with it. In fact, later in the hallway, Ensign Kim explains himself about why he wears an eye mask, which somehow drives him further into being the stereotype of the emasculated beta East Asian male. Because this honestly shocked me too.
Something about it that reminds me of being in the womb. Harry, in order to be reminded of something, you have to first... I remember being in my mother's womb. Right.
What the hell was that? What was that? No, what the fuck were you doing in my room? Just, I like eye masks because they remind me of the only place I felt safe, which was my mother's womb. Maybe Ensign Kim knew that anything about how horrible it was to wake up to Tom Paris being a condescending prick to drag him to yet another sexual pursuit of his would fall on deaf ears, since attempted murder is totally okay. As was the whack-ass detour this episode makes by creating a sleazy and gross French cafe crawling with French stereotypes. Voyager has very little fuel, even to replicate coffee, but plenty to run a holodeck. Whatever. You just have to forget about that. To sum up, Tom Paris has an insatiable obsession with having Ensign Kim watch him get laid, even to the point of breaking into his quarters to drag him out to do so. And there's this other racist beat because Garrett Wang, while American, is of Chinese descent, and so is his character Harry Kim. And the way we find out about that, because I think this is the first mention of Harry Kim's background, is through this throwaway line that made me dry heave.
There's an ancient Chinese curse, Captain. May you live in interesting times. Mealtime is always interesting now that Neelix is in the kitchen.
The third thing about this episode that makes me dry heave is Janeway's captaining style, which is completely amoral and reckless. After Neelix points out that replicator rations, the thingies that help you 3D print whatever you want, be it food or object, are meant to be used judiciously when they're out of coffee. Janeway finds what she believes to be a nebula full of something that can be synthesized into rations. And this is where we get one of the classic lines of the entire series.
There's coffee in that nebula.
The production notes state that this was intended to land as a joke, but what comes next is infamously referred to in Lower Decks as the Janeway Protocol, because when they come upon an energy wall, which is, according to B'Elanna, the ship's engineer, only 50 meters deep, like that's nothing, Janeway decides to, once again, punch her way through. So I don't think she's joking. I love coffee, okay? A few years ago, I was on vacation in Budapest, and the place I was staying in ran out of coffee and my brain short-circuited. So there's this picture of me guzzling a basic ass PSL, that's pumpkin spice latte for the uninitiated, in front of St. Stephen's Basilica. Caffeine addiction is a relentless mistress. But Janeway, your ass is in the Delta Quadrant with nowhere to get repairs or reliably refuel. There's no reason for her to believe that she can afford barreling through an energy wall 50 meters deep on full thrusters, or the damage it creates, or the injuries the crew is inflicted with. If the show just made Janeway with a chaotic neutral alignment, putting the ship and crew at risk for selfish bullshit on a regular basis, only for them to regenerate in the next scene, like sure, that would be totally acceptable, but that's not what's happening here. The crew finds out the thing they think is a nebula is actually a living creature. And the Janeway protocol has created a wound that they now have to repair. So Janeway's recklessness has created a situation where their burning out of the thrusters to get more fuel has ironically depleted their energy reserves by 11%. And now they have to double back to find some planet Neelix told them about to get more fuel. And in the process, she has also damaged the ship's hull and injured her own crew, as well as a brand new discovered living being. Why exactly is she still allowed to be a captain after that? Is she a hero because she cleaned up the mess that she created? She shouldn't need a lizard to tell her that her objective right now should just be getting everybody back home, not taking a rickety raft down some rapids for her beloved PSL. Once again, she has placed herself and her crew behind the 8-ball with her terrible judgment. I have to ask, why hasn't the crew mutinied yet? I don't get it. Even Neelix pointed out in dialogue how dumb she was being by putting the ship and her crew through all this. And Kes was like, oh, I love how she explores every crack. Some cracks really stink, Kes. They shouldn't be explored. They should be walked away from so you can go home. A coochie isn't always Moya, Catherine Janeway. And another silly beat happens when Chakotay tried to get B'Elanna in touch with her spirit animal and she tried to kill it.
I hope that you have better luck with yours than I had with mine.
B'Elanna's the only one I know who tried to kill her animal guide.
Of course, a show that revels in putting racist and sexist stereotypes on display can't even get the characterization of a race created on the show right. Klingons aren't just pointlessly violent and have quite a reverence for ritual. So that's another thing that Voyager gets wrong. Man, oh my God, this episode is exhausting. Chakotay, after kowtowing to his captor, uses a sacred Native American ritual to make inroads with Captain Janeway and reducing a huge and diverse collection of beliefs into a BuzzFeed quiz is a violent and disgusting erasure of identity. White people have absolutely no business creating nonsense Native American words and pointless and offensive representations of rituals that should never include white or non-Indigenous people. Indigenous folks are not there to be our spirit guides. Also, the bromance that Harry and Tom Paris have went from uncomfortable to light speed cringe-tastic, thanks to Tom talking about the talents acquired at prison besides making pruno from his own piss. And Janeway nearly killed everybody because she felt like it. I guess the lizard she saw in her vision was like, fuck everybody, get that coffee. Whoa, Nelly. This episode is wildly problematic trash that gives me dry skin and makes me want to shed it and forget it. Like, subscribe. No pressure, but peer pressure. Till next time, I guess.